Good morning, everyone. So, I'd like to start off, just congratulate Bob Hunter again. Let's give him a big round of applause. You know, I remember as 25 years ago, when I first got in this business, left a professional job that was paying me consistently every 2 weeks to take on this challenge with this day-to-day lease business model that we're in. And someone told me to come to the Hunter Conference, and it was at the Crown Plaza. About 150 of us showed up, but it was game-changing. We built a network, the inspiration, there's others like me, and I said this yesterday, that so many people in the room here today would not be where they are if it wasn't for Bob Hunter. So thank you, Bob. Good morning, Tony.
Good morning.
Welcome to the Hunter Conference. Welcome to Atlanta. This is your first, I believe, Hunter Conference.
It is, and I want to add my congratulations to Bob and the whole team. Terrific conference, and I see my friend Erica here in the front row. I have one favor for the group, and I'd like to ask the group to help me thank Erica and her amazing team here at the Marquee.
Absolutely. So we had an opportunity to listen to the CEO of the world's largest airline company just a little bit ago. And now we have an opportunity to listen to the CEO of the world's largest hotel company. So what a treat it is this morning.
We have good news, too. They didn't turn on the countdown clock, so we can go.
Oh, so we got 3 hours? Okay. Is that good with you guys? Now they got the message. So, Tony, everyone knows the Marriott story and journey, right? 97 years ago, it was, the company was founded by Jay Willard and Alice Marriott with a 9-seat root beer stand in Washington, D.C. And it's been an incredible journey since. Today, Marriott's the world's largest hotel company with 8,800 hotels throughout the world, representing 30-plus brands. But, Tony, not everyone knows your story, right? So I would like
to... The Marriott story is much more interesting than my story.
And I think it is absolutely interesting, but a lot of people know that story, and we're going to continue to talk about that story. But today, my goal is for people to get to know Tony. And so I know sometimes it's hard to talk about, but I would like to get that out of you. And so you were raised in Baltimore. Let's go all the way back to Baltimore, and then we'll take the steps to where you are today.
So, as you said, I was born in Baltimore. My father's just 20 years older than me, and so he was a student at Johns Hopkins, and we were living in my grandparents' row house in Little Italy, and he would go to school all day, come home, have a quick dinner with his family, and then he worked graveyard shifts at UPS loading trucks. And so I think from the very earliest memories I have, it was about work ethic. And I think so many of us, I mean, you heard Bob's story, I think so many of us are influenced by those early impressions of our parents, and that was certainly the case for me.
Yeah. And then how do you get into this business?
Well, by accident, I suppose. I was a lacrosse player in high school, and our lacrosse coach owned a restaurant in the town we were living, and so all of us worked part-time. I often joke with David Marriott. He loves to tell the story that his first job in hospitality was as a dishwasher, and I'm quick to remind him I had to get promoted to dishwasher. I started as a pot washer, and but my father, who was a career AT&T executive, used to commute into D.C., and he carpooled with one of our neighbors who was the lead lobbyist for what was American Hotel Motel Association, now AH&LA. And he was the one that suggested I look at hospitality school. It wasn't really on my radar.
And then you went to Cornell.
I did.
Yes. And then tell us those years, and then after Cornell, and how you wind up getting into Marriott.
Yeah, so I mean, it was a fabulous experience. I am not objective in any way. I think the world of the program, the faculty, You look across our industry, and so many of our leaders and influential members of the hospitality and travel community came out of that school. It was a great experience for me. I love to tell this story that the Career Services Office there does an amazing job, and the students have access to so many of your companies. If they're diligent, they get lots of interviews, lots of opportunities. I was fortunate enough to interview with 8 companies. I got 7 job offers and 1 rejection, and I carried that rejection letter for a long time because it was from Marriott. And but it's a fun story, but I also, I've reflected obviously over the decades, and they were right. I mean, one of the things I treasure about our company is its humility. And I think they probably looked at me and saw this newly minted graduate that thought he knew everything and said he needs to go get humbled a little bit before we invite him into the fold.
So you've had the opportunity to work with 2 of the most iconic leaders in our industry. So you're following, Mr. Marriott and Arne Sorenson, probably 2 of the greatest leaders that we've ever known in our industry. So that's like, we're in SEC country, Tony, so that's like following Bear Bryant and Nick Saban in Alabama. Let's start with Mr. Marriott. So what are some of the greatest lessons that you've learned from Mr. Marriott? And tell us a Mr. Marriott story.
Yeah, I mean, he is, beyond being this iconic, impactful leader in our industry, he is one of the most humble, engaged, inspirational, wise leaders you could ever have the privilege to spend time with. He'll turn 92 this month. He is chairman emeritus, and I recall the day he, quote, retired. We had a big board dinner to celebrate his 40 years as chairman and CEO. And I think that was on a Wednesday night. The meeting ended Thursday. I had to fly to Miami Thursday night. By the time I landed, I had 3 voicemails from him about various hotels and various transactions. So retirement is not a word that applies to him. He is deeply passionate about the business, about the company, about our associates. And there's so many things I could share with you. Maybe the best way to describe him, despite this extraordinary set of achievements throughout his career, both personally and professionally, if you have the chance to ask him, what's his biggest point of pride? Without hesitation, he says it's the opportunities that this business has created for our associates around the world. And it's a very genuine response. I could tell you 1,000 stories that illustrate how passionate he is and how much he believes in putting our associates first. But he's a remarkable man.
No, he definitely set the culture for your organization, and so many other companies like ours have emulated that culture over the years.
And I think, one of the great gifts to me, we'll probably talk a little bit about this, my appointment to this job was in many ways a battlefield promotion, which I know we'll talk about under devastatingly sad circumstances. But as I thought about trying to step into that role, one of the great benefits was the ability to ask for his counsel, to be guided by his experience, his wisdom. He spent effectively the entirety of his life in this business. And as we try to navigate challenges, both big and small, he's seen them all a dozen times. And the ability to tap into that wisdom weekly is a remarkable gift for me.
No, that's powerful. So let's turn to Arne now. Arne, as many of you know, was an outstanding leader, but even a greater human being, right? He had this incredible ability to connect with people that was very rare. So, how has he inspired your life and your leadership style?
Well, I think you're exactly right in characterizing, while a tremendous generational talent from an executive perspective, much more impactful in terms of just being an incredible human being. When you read all these beautiful tributes that were written after his tragic passing, the thing that stuck with me was so few of them talked about him as a business leader. And they talked about his humanity. They talked about even folks that had met him for 5 minutes, how impactful that time was, how deeply he connected on a personal level. There are a lot of lessons I learned from him. I think one of them was I am of a firm belief that listening is a skill that is in increasing short supply. We live in a world of sound bites and distractions, and Arne had this incredible way of engaging with someone when they were speaking and giving effectively 100% of his attention. And I think that's why even folks that had a chance encounter with him for 5 minutes in the porte cochere of one of our hotels felt like they really got to know him, because he engaged so deeply. So remarkable listener, deeply passionate, incredibly inquisitive. I see my friend Tricia here in the front row. When we did the Starwood transaction, we did what Arne called a world tour, where the executive team flew around the world to meet all of the Starwood executives, visit many of the Starwood offices and hotels. And it was fantastic and exhausting trip. And at the end of that long trip, I think it had whittled down to Tricia, myself, and Arne, and we were flying back from London. So immediately, Tricia and I queue up some terrible movie to watch on the way home and decompress, and I happen to look across the aisle, and Arne's reading a 600-page hardcover biography of William Howard Taft. He had this deep intellectual curiosity that made him so well-rounded. And then maybe the last thing I would say, he was such a transparent and passionate communicator. I think most folks in the industry and in the audience saw the video that he put out to our associates in the early days of the pandemic. And my guess is that is a video that'll be used in business schools for decades. It was a master class in communication and empathy.
No question. During the onset of the pandemic, it was, it was just unprecedented for anyone that's in this business. And we were just looking for any bit of light, right? In the darkest of hours, we were scared. And Arne, that video message, I probably watched it a dozen times. And
Me
my
too.
entire team watched it so many times. But he gave us hope in a very difficult environment. And that's what leaders do. And he was an amazing leader.
But now false hope, which is one of the things that I loved about that message. He was transparent about what he knew, about the long list of things that we didn't have any real insight. He did not provide any sort of false hope, but he provided a message of incredible optimism.
Absolutely. So, and look at where we are today, right? So now let's move forward. You were a deal guy, right, in development, with limited experience or background, you could say, in operations, branding, marketing at Marriott.
Washed a lot of pots.
Washed a lot of pots. That's qualifies, definitely. So, now you're overlooking 400,000 associates throughout the world.
Yeah, although I'd be quick to say, you used your college football analogy. As you know, when you're in a job like this, it's a bit like being the quarterback. You get way too much credit for the success and probably the right amount of blame for failure. But I'm not overseeing all of that. Our team is. One of the great advantages I have is when I was appointed to this role, I inherited this long-tenured, battle-tested, really extraordinary team of leaders around the world. And on the day of the announcement, I got nearly 30,000 emails from Marriott associates around the world saying, tell us what you need. And so when you take on a challenge like that, to know you've got this army of passionate leaders and professionals, it gives you a lot of confidence.
So you took over as CEO in 2021. It was a challenging time, no question. So the Wall Street Journal called it, quote, the most challenging job in American business, unquote. And at that time, congratulations on overcoming those challenges to where Marriott is today with record results. Arne would definitely be very proud. So what has surprised you the most about this role?
So as you point out, I spent so much of my career on the deal side, and as part of that, I traveled around the world. I spent a lot of time in our hotels, but often racing from one meeting room to another. One of the best parts of this current role is the amount of time I get to spend with our frontline associates. And the most pleasant surprise is seeing every day in dozens and dozens of countries around the world, their passion and their resilience. Shortly after things started to reopen, I was at a meeting in Orlando, and I met one of our associates, culinary associate, who was celebrating his 50-year anniversary with the company. And I said, God, thank you for all you've done for us. You must be so excited that you've got this big group in the hotel is full again. And he just sort of looked at me with this funny grin. He said, well, that's how it's supposed to be. And so when I spend time with our associates and I recognize these are all folks who have chosen careers in the service of others, and it reminds you of how profoundly difficult the pandemic was. If that's the career you've chosen, imagine showing up every day, knowing your colleagues have been furloughed, seeing empty hotels, not being able to provide the level of care and service that you've spent your whole career proud of. And so that's been the best part, is really understanding, even in the face of what Mr. Marriott has characterized as the most significant challenge in the history of the industry, our folks are raring to go. I mean, Erica arranged a welcome for me last night. You would have thought I was I don't know what. I mean, but it was genuine. It was the passion of her team here and the enthusiasm to have all of you here, to take care of you so well. It really is a privilege.
That's great. So let's turn to the franchise model just for a second. There's a lot of owners in the room here. This conference really caters to that audience. The franchise model has created tremendous generational wealth for so many people in the room here today. But revenues have grown before the pandemic. RevPAR was growing, but the margins were diminishing. And even today, we're very pleased with this revenue growth the last few years. But margins are still challenged. Labor costs have gone up greater than revenues. You have insurance costs, other costs now. The interest rate environment that we're in as well compounds to that. So I guess my question is, you have many stakeholders to balance, right? But what is Marriott doing to assist owners in a better business model going forward?
So I think it starts with mindset. I mean, you were very generous to point out the terrific results that Marriott and our other brand peers have achieved over the last couple of years. And while I'm pleased about that in terms of, given our scale, serving as a bit of a bellwether for the industry and demonstrating to the broader business community the strength and resilience of travel, I am, and all of my leaders, and really cascading down through the organization, we take about 2 seconds to celebrate Marriott's performance and then quickly remind ourselves that our business model is a high growth model, and that growth is on the shoulders and balance sheets of our partners. And so after that 2-second celebration, we are right back to being focused on, first of all, recognizing exactly what you point out. The business model that we operate under is very different than the business model you operate under. I wish I could tell you that somebody hit the pause button on the growth of expenses during the pandemic. As you well know, that's not the case. And so as an organization, we have got to be keenly focused on continuing to do everything we can, leveraging our channels, our loyalty platform to drive top-line revenue, and look everywhere we can for margin enhancement opportunities. That mindset has to drive all of our decision-making. And you and I talked about this the other day. If you're in the brand space, every morning you show up at work and there's a Rubik's Cube sitting on your desk. And that Rubik's Cube that requires solving really talks about every decision that we make. We've got to look through the lens of the constituents we serve. our associates, our guests, and our owners and franchisees. And often their wants and needs are diametrically opposed. And so we've got to, with the wisdom and the insights of all of our leaders and all of our partners, do the best we can to try and strike the right balance. And we most certainly don't get it perfectly, but we endeavor every day to try to strike the right balance.
So we listened to Ed Bastian on Delta just a little while ago. I want to follow up on something that I'm passionate about. I think the guest is ready for payment upon booking with cancellation fees, airline industry, Airbnb. And it just, if anything, it will bring some discipline to the guest as they are booking hotels. So what's your thoughts on that? Could that be an industry standard? Do you see that being an industry standard?
I think it could be. I think for us, certainly, there are a laundry list of policy changes, initiatives, innovations that we talk about and consider every day to support exactly what I described, to try and drive profitability for our owners while balancing the wants and needs of our guests. For us, we're in the midst of a massive technology transformation that includes the re-platforming of our three most important systems: reservations, property management, and the loyalty platform. That will unlock an extraordinary amount of flexibility to entertain opportunities like that and a wealth of other opportunities, some of which have been identified, some of which are to be identified in the future, but all with an eye towards improving the guest experience, allowing us to be more competitive in the attraction and retention of next generation talent, and driving the financial performance of our partners.
Yeah, and we can't wait for that transformation, because another topic that I think will be a game changer is, labor is our greatest challenge. Housekeeping within that is the greatest challenge. And just having your phone, being able to get on Bonvoy and tip your housekeeper would be a game changer. I know that we're working on it, but ultimately it should be an industry standard. And just like in Uber, we talked about it last week in Miami, that we're in the convenience economy. Yeah. And it has to be very simple, and those technology companies have made it simple. Yeah,
although I do think, and this won't surprise anybody in this audience, but I do think it's important to remind ourselves that we are in the people business, and we should never lose sight of that. I had a group of MIT graduate students who were doing a DC immersion, and they spent an hour touring our new headquarters. I did a session with them, and one of the students raised his hand, and he said, with all these incredible innovations and advancements in artificial intelligence, are you looking forward? Is it possible there'll be a day where you can run a hotel with no employees? And I said, gosh, I hope not. To me, of course, technology will lead to some operating efficiencies, but I think at Marriott, we're more excited about what technology will do in terms of creating capacity for our associates. If there is an advance in technology that creates 60 seconds of efficiency for a front desk agent, and they can use that incremental 60 seconds to better engage with the guest, understand the purpose of their trip, find some way to improve their experience, it's great news for our industry.
Absolutely. So, Tony, it's been 8 years now since the Starwood acquisition. And at that time, I remember Arne saying that 1 + 1 can't equal 2, right? And the Rubik's Cube here again. So talk to us about how that has benefited owners. And I get this question asked a lot. I want to follow up on this, is from people outside of our industry and even people within the industry, do we have too many brands?
Well, you're asking that in a much more polite, eloquent way than most people ask me that question. Usually it's, how on earth can you have all these brands? And I quickly point them to the Accor website to tell them we have a modest number of brands. But You know, to me, again, think back to this Rubik's Cube idea. When I think about the constituents that we serve, the thing I love about our portfolio is the breadth of choice that it offers, particularly to our guests, but really all three, to guests, to associates, and to owners. But if you are going to pursue that sort of strategy with a broad brand portfolio across multiple quality tiers, it's incumbent on us to make sure each of those 30-plus brands have a well-articulated, distinct positioning in the minds of each of those constituents. And again, it's 8 years on from Starwood. I would give us, if we're fair, a grade of incomplete. I think on most of those brands, we've achieved that objective, but not on all of them. And we work every day to try to get to that ultimate objective. But I do think when Arne talked about that, there were two things he talked about related to the Starwood transaction that are still critically important today. The first thing he said in the early days after closing the transaction, he got lots of congratulatory messages from across the industry, and he was quick to say, we don't deserve any congratulations yet. The only thing we've achieved is we paid more than anyone else. It'll be over the passage of time that will determine whether there are some measure of congratulations in order. And I do think among the great benefits of that transaction 8 years in, scale really does matter. It matters in obvious ways like the economies of scale that you get and the buying power and those sorts of things. But I also think it really matters when you think about building what we hope is the most powerful loyalty program across travel. Our objective is to keep folks within the Marriott ecosystem. How do you do that? You make sure you have the right products and the right experiences for every travel need they have, every trip purpose, everywhere in the world. And scale helps you work your way towards that ultimate goal.
So I want to talk a little bit about this incredible event that I went to just in January. Liam, you were there with your team.
I thought you were going to say dinner last night.
That was great as well, but not as great as what we experienced in January in India. So, as you all know, over 50% of all hotels in this country is owned by the Asian American community. And of those owners, 90+% originate from one part of India in the state of Gujarat and the city of Surat. And Marriott, the first hotel company, major hotel company that I know of, did a big celebration of friends and family that was amazing. And I've got to just share this. I mean, so many people, like my parents, came to this great country with very little in their pockets to something so powerful, and that's the American dream, and which is the greatest dream in the world, right? And so when we were having this event, it was really emotional, where people saw right in front of them this dream being manifested and going full circle. And I want to thank you for doing that, because it means so much to so many people in so many ways. So why was that important, Tony?
Well, do you want to roll the Liam dance video first?
That would be great, if they could. Liam has some moves. Yeah. It's what, changing the light bulb, putting out the cigarette, right? So the hotel business really helps with that.
Well, while we try to tee that up, a few reasons. I mean, number one, again, our partners are the lifeblood of our company. And I know that our team felt privileged to be part of that celebration. It was deeply emotional. I think it was deeply impactful across multiple generations. And part of the genesis for that, India is obviously a critically important market for us. We are now the largest lodging company in India. And late last year, I took a lengthy trip to India. I think I did 7 cities in 6 days. And I had the privilege of having a little over an hour with Prime Minister Modi. And one of the great things about this job is you get those sort of circumstances, but often you walk into a huge conference room with 15 aides. This was myself, Ranju Alex, who runs our India business, and the Prime Minister. And that was it. It was the 3 of us for an hour. And he talked with extraordinary pride about the number of Indians that have come to the United States in a multi-generational way, built these incredible businesses, and this trend that's starting with many of them returning home and investing in India as well. And it was an emotional, impactful meeting, and coming away from that and realizing how impactful and how strong that connection is was really the genesis for that trip.
Yeah. Well, thank you definitely for doing that. So it's Women's History Month. So Marriott has done much work on gender diversity. Can you talk a little bit about that work?
Sure. You know, this notion of creating opportunity for all has been embedded in our DNA for 97 years. I was happy when you gave the brief overview of the early start of the company to talk about Alice Marriott. Often people talk about J.W. Marriott Sr. Alice was our first CFO. She was our first female board member at a time when there were very few women on public company boards, and was every bit as influential in creating the culture that thrives today. We've continued that effort. We've got about 50% of our board is female. 50% of the C-suite of my direct reports are female. We set a goal years ago in our most senior leadership to get to gender diversity. We're at almost 47, 48% today. And while all of those are terrific milestones, the message across our enterprise is the minute we're self-satisfied, we go into a bit of a death spiral. And so matters of creating opportunity require commitment and vigilance and constant attention. And we continue to do that every day. If for no other reason, I've got an adult daughter now who reminds me and keeps me honest on that every day.
And we'll get to Isabella in a second. But hopefully one day we won't have to talk about that subject, right? That's the goal. So I want to touch on this really heavy subject, but I think it's so important that we talk about it every chance that we get. We have a responsibility, right, in this industry with the fight against human trafficking. And I know I'm passionate about it. You're passionate about it. Marriott has led in those efforts. Can you talk a little bit about why that's so important?
Yeah, it's all of us who work in this industry, we get to talk about all the amazing things that happen in our hotels every day. And if we execute well, we're really sort of woven into the fabric of people's lives. Weddings, anniversaries, birthdays, engagements, all these things. Sadly, there are some not so nice things that happen in hotels, and human trafficking is at the top of that list. It's an area where we can have a meaningful impact. And so years ago, we developed a training with an objective of training all of our associates around the world. And as we were putting that training together and rolling it out, one of the things that was crystal clear to us, it's not a competitive issue. It's a human issue, it's a moral issue, and it's an industry issue. And so we partnered with AHLA, and we made that training available to all of our peers as well. And so we often talk about this. We've trained 1.2 million Marriott associates, and we're rolling out the second phase of that training. We're deeply proud about that. In some ways, we're just as proud that we've trained 1.6 million competitor associates, because it is valuable work. You hear these both heartbreaking and inspiring stories about associates who've gone through this training, sadly seen a circumstance that didn't look quite right, used the knowledge and the insights that they gained from that training, and as a result have saved folks that had the potential to be victims of human trafficking. It is critically important work.
Thank you for all your efforts. So let's talk about Isabella just for a second. You know, she went to Cornell, like you. She is passionate about food and beverage.
She is.
Like you. I could just imagine, you know, the dinners.
I'm passionate about consuming it. She's passionate about working in it, but yes.
Yeah. And then I know they're passionate about taking pictures and posting on Instagram, too, as a father of a couple of daughters as well. There are many young people in the audience here today What advice do you give Isabella that you could share with the audience today on success and just life?
Yeah, I mean, we talk about it a lot. I start with the same wisdom that my father provided me about work ethic. That as we go through our careers, there are lots of factors over which we have no control. There are always going to be folks that are more experienced, better educated, whatever it might be. There's no excuse for being outworked. You only get outworked if you allow someone to outwork you. And so I've tried to instill that work ethic. I have tried to instill a desire to chase what she's passionate about, which she's doing, and extraordinarily proud about that. Encouraged her to make her own way, which is why she steadfastly refused to work for Marriott. But I'm proud of her. She said, I really care about doing a good job, and I worry that if I came to work for your company, as much as I love the company, the culture, the brands, I'd worry that if I was told I was doing a good job, I'd wonder whether I really was or it was because of you. So she's working for Dorchester Collection at the Beverly Hills Hotel in their training program in F&B. But we also talk a lot about setting ambitious goals. And if you're achieving every goal you set, you're not being aggressive enough in setting those ambitious goals. And that's something I believe for our company. It's something I believe for her. And I think it's good advice for all of us.
No, that's great advice. So you've had some amazing mentors, and we talked about it throughout your career. We talked about Arne's video in the darkest of hours where he showed us the light. He was not only the CEO of the world's largest hotel company, he was the leader of our industry as well. And now you are also the leader of our industry, not just the CEO of Marriott. So what can you talk to the audience about where this industry is going?
So it won't shock you that I am exceedingly optimistic about travel broadly, about our industry. It is, even before the pandemic, we saw, particularly in some of the younger generations, this spending shift away from hard goods towards experiences. The pandemic has really accelerated that trend across demographics. Folks, I think, realized during the pandemic, I haven't bought a new pair of shoes or a watch or a handbag or anything for the last 2 years, and I don't miss it that much, but I sure miss exploring new countries, trying new cuisines, immersing myself in local culture, seeing things I've only read about or seen in movies, and I think that's here to stay. I think having the ability to explore this amazing world taken away from us for a couple of years reminded folks that travel is so enriching. And I think that I joke with my daughter. I think she believes travel became popular when Instagram started. And the reality is travel is embedded in human DNA. During the pandemic, like many of you, I had this giant stack of books at home that I never had time to read. And so when we were on lockdown, I endeavored to get through a number of them. And I'm fascinated by the Roman Empire. And so I was trying to get through a few of those books. And there was a quote I read in one that was so impactful to me, I literally wrote it down on a piece of paper and stuck it in my wallet. And it was the Roman philosopher Seneca. And he said, "Travel and change of place impart vigor to the mind." And what I loved about that quote is it's a reminder for centuries, humanity has had this desire to explore the world. And so that's really what drives my optimism. Now, with that said, the industry's got lots of challenges, to be sure. You've hit on a few of them. The realities of the financial impact of the pandemic. We've got to remind ourselves every day, especially on the brand side, billions and billions of dollars of asset and enterprise value evaporated as a result of this existential threat. And it's incumbent on everybody in this room to do everything we can to return the industry to financial health. We also saw a flight of talent from the sector, the likes of which we've never experienced. Now, thankfully, I think all of us in the room are seeing some of that talent boomerang back, but not all of it, to be sure. And I talked earlier about the humility of our company and how much I treasure that humility, but I often say to our teams, this is the one area we can be a tiny bit less humble. And what I mean by that, all of us in this industry have an amazing story to tell. It's not an industry or a sector to go get a temporary job where you look for, quote, a real job. It is a set of businesses and an industry and a sector that provide limitless opportunities to build real careers, global careers. And I think as an industry, we can do a meaningfully better job telling that story, highlighting some of the amazing success stories that all of us have in our businesses around folks that start. I mean, we can think of 1,000 stories. So-and-so started as an hourly employee. They started as an intern. They worked part-time while they were working their way through school. And now they're running these huge businesses. There aren't many businesses across the broader world that allow for that sort of pull on your boots, work hard, and you can build these incredible careers. And I think we've got to tell those stories more loudly and more frequently.
Agree. We definitely need to tell more of those stories. So labor is going to always be a challenge, of course, in our industry. You touched on how Isabella, the social media, Instagram drives travel. Even with my kids, never even heard of some of these places, and they'll see it on TikTok or Instagram and say, we're going here, and I'll say, okay, let's go. So I've got to end with this. We are all in the travel business, this beautiful business that we're in, and the world absolutely should be explored. So what is, and this may be a little unfair question here, but what is your favorite place that you have been, and where's a place that you're aspiring to want to go?
So maybe not shockingly, I'm biased. Italy is my favorite place to visit in the world. It's, and not just because of the beauty and the food and the history and the culture, but I think there is a warmth and a hospitality that's embedded in the Italian people that's pretty incredible. I just talked about the fact that in the US, many folks view hospitality jobs as temporary jobs or interim jobs. All you need to do is go to any cafe in Rome or Florence, and you'll meet a waiter that's been there for 50 years and takes deep pride in his craft. And, I think the industry needs more and more of that passion around what we do. But I went to Vietnam late last year, and there's an app that you can put on your phone called BIN, B-E-E-N. Mm-hmm. And it's the electronic equivalent of when you were kids and you had a world map and you put push pins everywhere you had been. And I hadn't really been watching it closely, but Vietnam was my 100th country. And, but to me that says there's 90 more countries I need to visit, 91. I tried 2 weeks ago. I was in South Korea, and we went to the DMZ on Sunday, and they take you down into the tunnels. I got within 500 feet of North Korea, but I'm not sure I get to check that box yet. There are a lot of places I would still like to visit. I'd love to go to Myanmar. I've been to Greece, but there are so many destinations within Greece I'd like to explore a bit more. But there's probably places that aren't even on my radar yet, and that's really the privilege of our industry, is the ability to visit places that we probably as kids never dreamed we might get a chance to see. And every one of those destinations, you meet people, you're reminded how similar people are around the world. You get to try these amazing cuisines, you get to learn about these incredible histories and cultures, and it's just a privilege. And when people ask me why I chose this industry, that's really what I talk about, is travel is such a mind-opening experience. And I think to state the obvious, we live in a complicated world today, and all of us talk to government leaders, and one of the things you hear consistently, travel is one of those areas of common ground. Even when countries have significant disagreements, when there is real friction in their relationship. They want to keep the lines of communication open, and areas like travel is one area that is relatively non-controversial. And I think countries recognize the economic impact, the job creation impact, the number of entrepreneurs that are attracted to the travel space. And so I think travel has some really transformational capabilities.
Well, you heard it from the CEO of the world's largest hotel company in the world. Travel's here to stay. And let's give a big round of applause to Tony Capuano.